inspired you to join the Army?
9/11. So I was a Navy brat, grew up. My dad did 21 years in the Navy. He was a pilot and, grew up around the military, had nothing against the military, but I was going to, try to go a different way, do something else. And after college, I'll date myself here a little bit. I was managing Sam Goody, which, some of your listeners may not even know what that is anymore, but 9/11 happened while I was opening the store, and kind of like our version of Pearl Harbor, right? And really, just I felt the desire to do something more and give back. So I started that journey to join the military, and that's what the catalyst was.
Why military intelligence?
um, well, part of me, kind of thought I was going to be like a Jason Bourne type of person, doing all that. Because I wanted to go counter intel. That was the one that I really wanted to do. At the time, they weren't bringing counter intel people in. So I wound up doing intel analyst and, just thought I was getting into something, kind of cool. It was different. And I know all the jokes and most of them have a lot of truth in them.
That's awesome. So you ended up out at Fort Huachuca for training and all that?
Absolutely. I was out there for my initial training, obviously, and then each of my NCO schools. And I loved the area. I was never stationed there permanently, but I always loved going back to school there. Beautiful area. And it's hard to wake up in a bad mood at Huachuca with just the mountains surrounding you and everything. Just absolutely gorgeous.
Is it hot?
It can be. When I went to BNOC, we got there in April. And we got a blizzard. We had a whiteout
in April. Arizona's finicky because I was just out there last month and it was so stupid hot. I couldn't handle it. I was like, and I live in Florida, right? Like, it's hot and humid here, but it's bearable. Arizona was rough. It was pretty bad.
Oh yeah, it gets hot. So like BNOC, we started with the blizzard, not the blizzard, but the whiteout, and then none of it stuck, obviously. And then a couple months later, we're getting ready to graduate, and it's 110, 115 degrees, and it's like I didn't pack for this.
Right. So you end up military intelligence. What? Military intelligence encompasses so much. So what are you actually doing? What was your job?
Can't talk about it. No,
of course. That wouldn't surprise me at this point, Jason Bourne.
So what we like to refer to it with the intel analysts is the hub of the intel wheel. So our job, we're not a specialist in anything. So what we do is we take all the intel that comes in and we build products for the command teams, to make their decisions. So we take that human intelligence, that signal intelligence, the imagery intelligence and all that, and we do our analysis and we put together what we believe, the picture is, and we give that to the commander and enable the decision-making process to take place.
I guess I couldn't really said it better myself. Because you've got people out there collecting SIGINT, and you're just bringing it all together to paint the picture so that decisions can be made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we learn a little bit about each of them as we go along, but not enough, in my opinion, to be proficient at any one of them.
Right.
But we have at least a working understanding of how the process works and how they're doing things, and it enables us to ask the right questions back to the gatherers as well and say, hey, can you look at this? Can you pull this piece? And to answer some of the questions that we're coming up through our own analysis.
Awesome. Now, you in the questions that I asked and to bring you on the show, you mentioned some unexpected lessons you had learned from some key mentors in the military. So, who were those mentors to you, and what lessons did they teach you that were so unexpected?
Trying to remember back to that question and which example I used.
I'm sure you've got plenty of examples. A 20-year career, you probably had several mentors over the course of that career.
Yeah, so my first mentor was Master Sergeant Cole. He was an infantry guy, whole career infantry, wound up hurting his knees and had to reclass. So he reclassed to Intel as a senior NCO. And so he didn't have the background in being an intelligence NCO, but he knew how to take care of soldiers. And so under him, I earned the rank of Sergeant E5, and he really took me under his wing and mentored me from the beginning on how to take care of soldiers and what that looked like. And so I think that mentorship probably helped me more than anything else throughout my career. Because once you make E5, you're going to have soldiers just about all the time. So yeah, I continue to have soldiers, and you continue to have challenges. And every group and organization you're in has its own set of challenges, and just that foundation he put in me really helped me throughout my career.
Well, and it's probably still helping you to this day with the work that you're doing to really, be a leader to soldiers through the transition and beyond. And so what does leading soldiers the proper way look like?
Oh, yeah. You're ready to start a debate on social media with all this.
Yeah, that's the point. We're going to have the hard conversations.
So I would say first and foremost, and I believe every NCO out there would agree with me, is your soldiers come first. And that's really the mindset you adopt, and you start putting them first. And there's no secret that we have high divorce rates in the military, and we struggle with some of those personal relationships and things like that. And believe it, in my opinion, our dedication to our service members does impact that. And like, I know when I got out, even though I didn't deploy for the second half of my career, I deployed a lot in the first half but not the second half, and I was home a lot more. I still, when I retired, felt like I owed my family a lot. Like I had to give back to them because, in my opinion, I had neglected them because I wanted to do everything I could. From being that young team leader where you got 3 or 4 soldiers to being a first sergeant where you got a whole company, and it doesn't matter what time that phone rings. You're answering it, and it's I've taken a couple drives to the police station, and had to deal with situations in the middle of the night. It happens, and that to me is really the foundation. Is you're putting your service members first. You're adopting that servant leadership mentality, and you're doing the things you have to do to make sure that they're successful. And I'm a firm believer that if you take care of your people, they're going to take care of you. So I didn't get to the rank of master sergeant just because I was awesome. I was probably more like Bill Murray in Stripes than anything else. I'm not going to lie about that. But I had great people under me. Who made our team look great. And hopefully I gave to them as much as they gave to me. And I think those who adopt that type of mentality and understand that you're not going to do it by yourself and you need to really take care of your people, I think they're the ones that really succeed in the military.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like that was sometimes to your detriment because you forget to take care of yourself?
I had a command team once tell me that, and they said it in a negative connotation, that no one would ever doubt how much I cared about my soldiers. I took that as a compliment, but I knew the tone and how they said it and what they were referring to. It was not a compliment, because I believe they wanted me to walk more of the party line, if you will. But
play the politics game. Is that what you mean?
The politics game, and whatever decision was being sent down from higher, that whether you agreed with it or not. Because as a senior NCO, part of your job is to question things that don't make sense, and protect the people under you. And, I was taught that as a young sergeant first class E7, that part of your job is to rock the boat. You got to figure out how to do it in the right way. But part of that job is to, tell the emperor they're not wearing any clothes. And I tried to do that to the best of my ability when things didn't make sense or when I thought it was impacting my soldiers negatively. And sometimes that made my life a lot harder. Other times, it worked out to the benefit of my soldiers.
Yeah, man. How many deployments did you do?
I did a total of 4 on varying lengths. My shortest being 4 months. The whole dwell time thing where they gave me my dwell time and then sent me out there for the last couple months, and having fun with it. I told my first sergeant at the 2-month mark that it was halfway through my deployment and I needed some R&R. He didn't find the humor in it, but I thought it was funny.
I did 4 also, but none of them were ever 4 months. And dwell time, what's that? I don't know what that is. I don't think I ever had more than 10 or 11 months ever my whole career. So I think it's funny too. And I would have been just as jealous if you were on a 4-month deployment and told me you were halfway through.
And that was when I was with the EOD battalion, and you want to talk about some amazing leaders. There were some amazing senior NCOs in that group, the sergeant majors and the first sergeants and things like that. Um, Learned quite a bit from those guys, and the fact that you could have those jokes and those conversations with them, and they took their job very seriously, but because of all that stress and pressure, they also knew how to relax and unwind and goof around when time allowed. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to be with them, and I learned quite a bit from that community.
Yeah, what do you think you learned most from all 4 of your deployments that really sticks with you in either what you're doing now or stuck with you for the rest of your career? Because you did say that you deployed a lot the first half of your career, not so much the second half of your career. I know for me, mine were basically every other year my whole career, and there was something that came out of every deployment that shaped how I would lead soldiers after that. And so, did you find anything like that that helped you kind of, adapt your leadership style? Or
So I would say that the first thing you learn with your first deployment is what you can go without. Um, because you're used to the creature comforts and whatever you collect, or maybe you're a hoarder, whatever the case may be, and you realize that you don't need a lot of that. Now, granted, I like having certain things and what have you, but at the same time, when it comes down to it, you don't need it. Um, the second deployment, the first deployment was just my wife and I. If something happened to me, she'd be able to carry on, right? Second deployment, I had a child. That one really hit me different, knowing that now there's a little person that's relying on me as well, and I was an intel guy, so I wasn't, I was a fobbit, I wasn't, out there fighting the fight. I was, providing the products to help the warfighter fight the fight. Um, but it does hit you differently and makes you understand the importance of family and what kind of commitments you have as a family man. um, I would say the biggest thing that I learned leadership wise through the whole thing was something that Sergeant Cole used to say all the time: pressure bust pipes. And that's always stuck with me, and realizing that those 4 different deployments, as well as the rest of my career, there's times where a lot of pressure comes in, and you learn how to handle the pressure. You learn how to deal with situations like that. And, in a civilian world, you hear people talk about how busy they are, and you try not to laugh. Because when you're running 24-hour ops in a deployment, during a war zone, there's a different level of busy that comes into that. So but it's something that we learn to handle, and I also think that feeds into some of the PTSD issues and things like that we deal with as well, because you got all that high pressure, but then you also have a lot of things happening around you. So I think that was probably the biggest thing through all of that was, being able to handle pressure. Now, have I always handled pressure great? No. Do I still not handle pressure great from time to time? I probably don't.
yes, yeah,
But to me, it was one of those things. Like, I remember as a first sergeant, my XO he was a little high strung, great guy, but a little high strung. And he came by one day, and I forget what was going on, but he's like, "Why aren't you upset?" I'm like, "Sir, if I'm upset, what do you think the rest of the company's going to do? Just if I can remain calm, then we can keep the soldiers calm. You run around like a chicken with your head cut off, doing what you got to do. I can help direct some of the Joes to take care of the things we need to do, and so I try to remain more calm than not. But sometimes the anger issues and the other things that come up, do impact that. So
yeah, man. So you do the deployments, you hit 20 years, it's time to retire. Here comes the transition, and I don't think, well, in fact, I know that the vast majority of us are not ready to get out. The transition assistance program when I got out was not enough. It's and And so what were the struggles that you went through in your transition? How did you arrive at the conclusion it's time to retire? Because as a master sergeant, you could have still, gone to 30 years if you wanted to, put on sergeant major, probably had a, chase the brigade, the division type stuff if you really wanted to. But you made the decision to get out. So what was the thought process behind that? And did you've mentioned that you went through your fair share of difficulties. So let's talk about those.
So first and foremost, let's put this into perspective. Do you want Bill Murray being a sergeant major of a division?
I mean, sometimes I think he would have been better than some of the division sergeant majors I did have. Like it's a 50-50, right?
Yeah, like later in my career, especially when I was able to do first sergeant, I covered down a couple times on different sergeant major positions. I adopted that mentality that it wasn't my job to increase stress. There's already enough stress. I need to, try to keep it managed. And so I'd like to joke around and have fun with the soldiers, and especially when, we had downtime, or, it wasn't a serious thing. It was just, times that we could unwind a little bit. But I was always told that you would know when it's time to go. And honestly, the I'll probably get in trouble for saying this. The first the first hint that I had when I was a brand new master sergeant, and I was looking around at a bunch of majors, thinking, "There's no way I want to be a sergeant major for any of these people." The group that I was around, there were a bunch of them that I didn't. It wasn't going to be a good fit. So that was kind of the first thing, and then aches and pains and injuries and things like that played a factor as well. So when it was all said and done, I knew it was time to go. So I started the process, and I took a very analytical approach to it. So the first thing I did was I looked at my buddy who was about 6 months ahead of me, another master sergeant retiring, doing that whole thing. So I jumped on his coattails, and whatever he was doing, I was doing. So I jumped into a couple different programs and things like that. The first one being the Who You Know show out of Dallas, Texas. It's a couple of civilian guys. They're financial managers. They run a job networking type show to help people. And so they had this career summit thing. So I jumped on that and attended it. And that was one of the very first things I did in my transition. And it completely changed the trajectory of my transition, because I wasn't, being taught by a military person. I wasn't being, told how to do this or that in the military. This was a completely civilian standpoint or viewpoint of the job search and the things you had to do. So I developed a relationship with those guys, and at the time, I got into doing a bunch of videos on LinkedIn and trying to, do the whole networking thing, because that was one of the big things they pushed. And then obviously TAPS classes tell you to do that. And we developed this relationship. And so Trevor reached out to me and said, "Hey, you need to start a podcast." No, I don't. He goes, yeah, you do. No, I don't. I really don't. It wasn't anything even remotely on my radar, But the one thing I did say when I started my transition is I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. I wanted to try new things. I wanted to experience some things. So, I was in, a group of people with him that I was doing all this stuff on LinkedIn. And so we started talking about this podcast thing. Well, it turns out that his partner, Mark, was a veteran, actually. He did 4 years in the Air Force. And so they had been running this show for a couple of years. So Mark came on board to be my original co-host and the co-founder of VetSOS. And so, we worked together for the first year, and he really, showed me the ropes of, how they do things. And, we started that whole thing going with the podcast. Now, what that did for me is that actually made my transition very, very good, because I was interviewing people in the transition space, and I was hearing all these horror stories. So if you just stop and listen and pay attention, you can avoid all these pitfalls. So, I was talking with these guys, and I was hearing all the stories. And so I was trying different things. And, I was fortunate that, in my organization, I had some time, and I started early. I started 2 years out, so I was able to do the TAP program,
Well,
but I was
that's
also
really
able.
unusual. You started 2 years out. I mean, in a med board process, you don't even know when you're getting out, so you don't get to start, right? And typical retirees, they usually a year max, so you're rare in that you started 2 years out. And a lot of people I've talked to, I think it's probably the same for you because we're in the same space talking about transition, will tell you, a year is not enough time. You really need to start 18 months to 24 months out. Do you still agree with that based on your experience with doing? Yeah.
Oh yeah, in fact, some of the things I've started telling people is start your transition as soon as you join the military. If let's say you're an engineer, if you love what you're doing as an engineer, why not start working on those things that are going to help you after the military, those certifications, that education, those types of things that you can do over the course of your career, however long it is. I'm not saying, quit on active duty and just start transitioning right away, but, start setting yourself up for success after the fact.
Yeah, for sure. So the realization that you needed a new tribe impacted your transition in talking to these guys, suggesting that you start the podcast and really start hanging around with those guys. So let's explore that some more. Like, how did that, create the vision that you needed this new tribe, and how did that smooth your transition out? Because you're listening to these stories, you're learning how to avoid mistakes. That's one thing, but how do you take action in a different direction so that you avoid those mistakes to get to where you're at?
So obviously it started with listening, so hearing that stuff and then, trying to find the resources that were going to work for me. We got, at the time, there were over 45,000 veteran support organizations, so trying to figure out which ones are going to work, is a lot of fun. Um, Alfredo Torres came on the podcast and he used the analogy of transitions like a buffet. You go up to the buffet and you take some of this, some of that, some of this, take what you really like and try some other things. And that kind of stuck with me. It's like, I could try this, I could try that. Like I did a PMP boot camp. By the time the boot camp was over, I knew I'd never have a PMP.
Yeah, yeah.
It showed me the way.
I just did an LSS green belt, and I was like, "Yep, this is not for me, but this is what I need to make myself competitive to get into a program that I know is for me." So yeah, I get it.
Using tools like Veterati. I was doing 5 calls a week with different people, but what I was doing is I was using it to cross things off the list. So, when I was looking at potential jobs, I'm like, there are thousands of things I qualify to do. What do I want to do? So I'd call somebody and talk to somebody who was a PMP. Oh, nope, don't want to do that. Someone who was a black belt Lean Six Sigma. Nope, don't want to do that. And so just that helped me really narrow down my list of things. Um, and so to me, when it comes to transition, we have to take full advantage of what's out there for us. And, I tell people don't just take one recommendation because I may have loved the program, but you did the same program and you hate it. So talk to 1, 2, 3, 4 people, get their opinion of a program. And, if more people liked it than didn't like it, then maybe it's right for you. Um, so it's just trying to figure those things out. And, it's an adventure. It really is,
I love,
and
yeah, I love how you said Alfredo Torres came on your show and he said transitioning is like a buffet. I really wish I would have had that advice, because it's almost permission to, so my journey after I got out was, manage a vape store, work in a vape store, manage a gun store, go to college, go to flight school. I tried a lot of different things and I always felt really guilty about it because I always had this like false notion or this expectation that you're supposed to get a degree and immediately get a career. You're not really allowed to try a bunch of things. And I'll even be honest and say that there were people in my life that were telling me that, friends, family, right, telling me like, what are you doing with your life? You need to pick something and stick with it, that kind of thing. And that didn't resonate with me at all. You mentioned Veterati and getting on the phone with different people 5 times a week to try and figure out I didn't know Veterati was a thing, and then I just saw yesterday that they're closing their doors, which is really sad. But I've also taken advantage of programs now like ACP mentorship program. What a great program that is! Learned so much, and it's opened so many doors for me. And I couldn't agree more with what you're saying about finding these resources, exploring these resources. tuning out all the noise from the people that are telling you you're not doing this the right way. It's like, well, fuck you. You don't get to control my life. Like, it's okay for me to explore things, to find out outside of being an infantryman what resonates with me. Who am I mean, is that really what you're saying here? Is like, figure out who you are?
No, that's all part of it, right? Because to me, the military is a part of who we are. It's not who we are. It's a part of who we are. It's a chapter in our lives that helped develop certain skills and, what have you. So some people make that transition. Some people are stuck and still try to go by their rank and all that stuff after they're out of the military and all that good stuff. And, I was one of those guys that, I came in at 28, so I was already a little bit older. And when I retired, I honestly thought I was walking away, and the most that you would see me relate to the military was going to be the PX and the commissary, you know. But next thing you know, we get into this podcast, and I wasn't looking to become part of the transition space, but we're trying to put together a good product and trying to help people, and we've kind of put ourselves in the transition space, and I absolutely love it. We got a great community. And so, take that time to figure out who you are, and the more time you can take, the better. Um, I think we're probably close to the same generation too, and the fact that, to me, when I got out, I wanted to have one job and that was it. I'm done, whatever. But then I started listening to audiobooks, and like I listened to one on Winston Churchill, and I listened to one on Teddy Roosevelt. And what stuck with me most out of those is those guys had like different jobs every other year, like their entire adult life. It's like, huh, okay, so maybe it's okay to jump around and figure out, because you may land that perfect job right out of the military, you may not, and that's fine. That's okay.
Man, I love that you just spoke about that, because I've never read either one of those books, but I wish I had, because I think it would have curbed some of those outside influences and let me know that, it's okay that you're trying, go into flight school because you think you want to be a pilot, and then you find out that you're basically starting over as a private again, kind of having to pay dues, in the there's really only two ways to get your hours. You either find low time companies that are hiring, which are super competitive jobs that you really don't get unless you know somebody, or you have to be an instructor where you're dependent on students to show up. You're going out into a little box in the sky and doing the same thing 4 or 5 times a day. It just wasn't for me. Flying, I thought, was my dream, right? So when I walked away from that, and I had all the people chirping in my ear telling me, like, what are you doing? You just wasted your GI Bill to go, do this. And now you're moving out of it, and I hung it up for a little bit and went on and used the voc rehab program to get a degree, right? A bachelor's degree, because that's the path that was laid out for all of us, right? That's basically what ACAP told me after I wrote my resume. Okay, use your GI Bill, get a degree, and then go find a career. And, going through college, yeah, it was a much different experience than I thought it was going to be, because I was in my 30s and mature, had some life experience. I didn't think college was that hard, but then I get done with college and it's like, I don't want to use a business/psychology degree to sit in an office all day and do what, right? Like, kind of like you said, being introduced to PMP or, LSS, it's like, this is definitely not for me. So then it's starting all the way over again and trying to figure out, what resonates with me, who am I, and what can I do? And I, like you, never thought I'd be in the transition space for veterans, but here I am. And it is one of the most rewarding things I've ever done with my life. I don't wake up any day and be like, I don't want to work today. You know what I mean? And that's a really cool place to be.
Well, absolutely. And the weirder thing to me is the longer you're in this space, the more you learn, and it's not always good stuff you learn, so we talk about the VA sharks and things like that. Well, there's other organizations out there too that maybe their heart isn't in the right place either. That's not to say that there are a ton of great organizations and people who truly care. But it is what it is. It's kind of I attribute it to kind of like the used car salesman with 28% interest. You got those guys targeting our privates, and then the veterans. We got some of that stuff going on as well.
Yeah, I've never met an NCO that didn't have to deal with a private that went and got a 28% interest on a car. And I actually learned through that JAG has ways of getting them out of that. And depending on what state you're in, that's pretty cool. But definitely never met it. I relate to that. You talked about doing the podcast made the transition much easier for you, but you still coped with dealt with coping with some of the anger issues and all of that stuff. I relate to that so much because that was the biggest thing that PTSD or TBI had its grip on me. It was so quick to anger and lose my temper and almost just like rage blackout, if you will, just not knowing what you're doing. So how did you deal with that, and what tools and modalities did you use to get over that and overcome that, even though it wasn't really transition related? I'm sure it's kind of career related, right? It's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Bourbon.
That's not the right answer.
No, it absolutely is not.
Because I also was a whiskey guy, and I'm here to tell you it's rough.
So when I left Korea, my liver should have gotten an MSM. I'm telling you.
With B, probably.
Yeah, with Valor device, absolutely. There's the running jokes that that being in the military, you're going to have anger issues, you're going to have a drinking problem, you're going to have a nicotine addiction, a divorce, and this and that, and there's some truth in it, right? That's why it's kind of a joke, but there is some truth in that. And I have openly talked about my issues with anger, especially with my soldiers. Because I went to anger management several times while I was in the military, and being an intel guy, I wasn't overly concerned that anything was going to happen with my clearance, and nothing ever happened with my clearance. But trying to convince people, that were my soldiers, saying, "Look, it's not going to impact you. You need to go get the help you need." And so hopefully I was able to get through to some people and help them seek out the help early. But I've always been open with that and continue to struggle with that, right? And so the alcohol thing, I know I'm an alcoholic. I mean, it's a lot of us are, and what I try to do is quit or not drink, and it's a continuous battle, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that, I'm winning that fight every day, but at the same time, I know that I could easily fall into that case where I'm drinking all day, I'm ruining my life, I'm ruining this, I'm ruining that, and I'm very aware of that. And I try very hard to, have a drink, if I want to have a drink or what have you. And is that the right answer? Probably not either. But I spent many years looking at the bottom of the bottle for the answers.
Did you find them?
No, never found them. Never found them once.
Usually create more problems.
Yeah. And I did. I created some problems for myself and things like that. And I've been fortunate that I really haven't had any health issues related to that and what have you. So, trying to get on the right path and do the right thing. And I would encourage anybody listening that, seek out the help you need, whether it's for mental issues, it's for alcohol, drugs, what have you, go find the help that you need because it's there. And figure out what's going to work for you. Like I've gone to AA. I don't like AA. It didn't work for me. Nothing against the program. I just personally, it didn't work for me. So I try other things. And I think it's important that, people do that. Be understanding that there's no one solution fits all. You got to figure out what that is.
I love that you just said that you actually sought help while you were in. And what years were you in? Because this is interesting to me.
I was in from 03 to 23.
Okay, so I was in from 03 to 15. So we were in the exact same time. And I'm curious, what compelled you really to know that it's okay to go ask for help? Because in the world I was in, it was never okay to go ask for help. I really truthfully did watch guys lose their career for going to get help, struggling with the nature of what we do as infantrymen and trying to overcome that stuff. So as a 17-18-year-old kid who's watching all of those people tell you it's not okay to go get help, watching careers get ended, here you are, a senior NCO that admittedly went and got help for anger management several times while you were in, and it never affected you. So I guess you were just taught by better leaders, maybe, or is it just different in the different branches? Like how is that the first time I'm ever hearing of someone from my time in service getting help and it didn't affect them?
So there is a big difference between the infantry world and all the other worlds. You
Big
know,
difference.
you go on profile for something, you're a shitbag. You can't complete the mission. You can't do this. You can't do that. I'm an intel guy. If I can't run for a month or do a ruck march or something like that, as long as I can still use my laser pointer and type, it's all good, right? So there is definitely a difference in mentality there. Now let's go back to my mentor was an infantry guy. Oh, he get mad if you want a profile. But
It's yeah.
and I think ultimately I helped him a little bit too to understand that this isn't the infantry world. Um, you know, maybe I got to him, maybe I didn't. Um, but I think coming in at 28 also changed my approach to things because, but think about it. When do most people in the military learn their leadership style? It's around
26, 25,
yeah.
26,
I
probably.
always
Yeah.
said like 21 to 25, about the time you make E5 or you make a young captain. That's when people really start to develop who they are as a leader. I had already done that. I knew who I was as a person, as a leader, and what have you when I came in. Now, the military definitely changed some things and add some things to my toolkit, but I knew who I was. So for me, I also came in married already. So when I came back from my second deployment, I was very angry, and um, it took my mom and my wife saying, "Hey, you need to go get help." Because like personally, I was ready to put a first arm through a wall. I'm 6'6". I averaged about 280 pounds while I was in. It wasn't like I was a small little intel geek. I, I
You
was a
got
big figure.
yeah.
Um, so I mix that with anger. That's a bad combination. So really, between my mother and my wife saying, "Hey, you need to go talk to somebody." I think that really was the catalyst that made me go do it. And at the time, it was my second enlistment, and honestly, I was planning on getting out after 8 years and all that good stuff. So I didn't at that point. I wasn't even thinking career. I didn't care what happened, if it impacted my clearance or anything like that. So it was just kind of a combination of things. But then after I did it, and then I stayed in, and I continued to go every couple of years when I felt like I needed a tune up, and that just it all played a factor in being able to tell soldiers, hey, it's not going to impact you. You need to go get the help you need.
I'm so glad that at least one branch in the military figured out that it's not weak or unacceptable to admit that you need help to better yourself, because you know I think that's a large part of the problem that affects guys and gals getting out from our time frame, from '03 to now, really, is I watched those guys, so you're struggling mentally, take a knee, face out, drink water, drive on. I mean, that's really, we don't talk about this. We're not going to talk about this. And I don't know. It just makes me feel good to know that at least somebody out there did get a chance to be an example, to admit that they needed help, to get the help, and then to pass along to their soldiers that it's okay to get help, and it's not going to hurt your career. So I commend you for that, man. What strategies did you learn through anger management and over your career to help you become more resilient and move past that anger?
You actually just hit the key word, resilient. It was actually the Master Resiliency course that did the most good for me. Um, the the different like anger management hit or miss right in the military. So the first time I went, I was talking to a college co-ed. and whether she knew what she was doing or if I was just being a pain in the ass, who knows? But we probably didn't cover a whole lot and actually really do anything. Um, the second time, it was some young lieutenant who told me that she didn't think I had anger issues. I thought I was gonna have to slap the shit out of her, just to prove my point.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll show you anger.
yeah. And then when I actually got to Korea, I went twice and wound up having the same doctor both times, Lieutenant Colonel, and she really helped me. She really, helped me look at things and talked about breathing techniques and taking a step back and removing yourself from situations and things like that. But between those two, um, I went to master resiliency training and looking at the different skills that we teach in positive psychology and resiliency, applying those to my life, I think made a bigger impact than any of the anger management that I went to. It really helped me take a closer look at myself and be able to stand back and look at situations.
You're not the first person who's told me master resiliency training is one of the best courses that the Army offered. I didn't get a chance to go to it. So what are some of those skills they teach in the master resiliency course that you latched onto that really did help you?
Let's be fair. You probably thought it was what was making the military weak, because that's what most of the infantry guys would say about it.
To be fair, honestly, it wasn't even on my radar. What was on my radar was either Ranger School or Battalion Master Gunner, right? Because that was the fastest path for an infantry guy to get E7. And I spent a lot of time at 3rd ID and then ended up moving up to Fort Lewis. So I was largely, just a mechanized guy the whole time. I was never like on a crew for a Bradley or a Striker. I was always a dismount. But, there's a lot of leverage because you don't get a lot of slots to go to Ranger School in those types of units. I mean, more so at Lewis than you ever did at Stewart. So Master Gunner was always kind of the thing on my radar. And so Master Resiliency training wasn't really, I didn't have an opinion on it one way or another.
That's good, because honestly, they made it mandatory at one point where every time you PCS, you had to go through a couple of the modules, right? And man, teaching those was such a pain in the butt because you'd get a handful of combat arms guys. This sucks. This is what makes the Army weak. But I'll tell you, real quick story on that. I had one of those guys. I'm like, hey, dude, I got it. This isn't for everybody. Just unfortunately, you got to sit here with me for 2 days. So, let's have some fun with it. And I think part of the problem with MRT is we don't always have the best instructors. Not everybody is an instructor, but a lot of people do the program and they become instructors. So fast forward 2 years, I get to facilitate a course. So I'm out there and this kid comes up to me. Hey, you remember me? I'm like, yeah, dude, you were in class like 2 years ago. He's like, yeah. You convinced me to do this. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, remember how much I said this was making the Army weak and soft and this and that? And, taking the class with you made me look at a different view. And so this kid went through the MRT training and became a certified resiliency trainer. And that really meant the world to me. The fact that I was able to get through to one of those guys that was really against it. Because like I said, to me, it really helped me. So believe it or not, everybody makes fun of, hunting the good stuff. But that to me is such a great skill that as a non-commissioned officer, you can use anywhere. And so I started it at the house with my family. At the time, my youngest was 3 or 4. And it got to the point where every night at dinner, he would be the one who started it. Daddy, what good happened today? And we just all go around and talk about, what good happened. And it changes your mindset. Something as simple as that, just talking about the good things and celebrating them just changes your entire mindset. And it's stuff you can do at PT formation. You can do it at a morning formation. You can do it, anytime you want to do it. And it's just so powerful. So to me, as much as people make fun of it, that to me is one of the greatest skills because you instantly can change the dynamic of a room. And then looking at stuff like, spiraling and scatter shot and things like that, when you talk about your responses to things and realizing that you can easily fall into any one of these very quickly. and start making leaps of this is connected to that and it has no relation whatsoever, but your mind's just in that wrong spot, so you start making those connections, and or you're taking out all your aggression from a bad day on somebody else. And there's a great skit that we do where basically you have sticky notes, and you start in the morning and you start sticking these sticky notes to yourself about all these things that go wrong. And then at the end of the skit, you come home and you blow up on your spouse or whatever because of something silly like milk. It had nothing to do. She had nothing to do with the whole day, but she's the one who felt the anger. So stuff like that to put it in perspective. That's just it's one of those skills that really made me sit back and think and realize that, I mean, how often do we have just a crappy day, and the most innocent person could be the one who feels the full wrath?
Man, it sounds to me like the the MRT training taught you a lot of the skills that I learned through, my psychedelic integration journey, right? So you mentioned hunting the good. I would call that a gratitude practice. Really, what am I grateful for today? Or, flipping that probably to an abundance mindset, like looking around, understanding that, I have more than most and I can be okay with that. It was also, and I'm sure MRT kind of touches on this because it sounded to me like that's how you were explaining it, is we are hardwired to seek out all the bad things that happen to us. It just naturally happens. And so, like what you were saying with dinner and your son starting, what good happened today and how powerful that is because it's rewiring your brain to recognize the good things that are happening. You had touched on, breath work. So if they're teaching that in MRT, that's something that I absolutely wish I would have been a part of, because, the breath work for me is a way for me to stop that spiral that we all go down. Right. Like that. And you mentioned that spiral, and it's, I think we're all affected by it, but just a simple, 4 count kind of, pause, 4 count, and then you release, 4 count, and then, back to the inhale is so much. It's just so useful to reset and stop that spiral. And I use it on a pretty much a daily basis now. So are those the things that you were getting out of that training?
Oh yeah, we do a lot with guttural breathing as well, and getting that full breath in, and then letting it out, and just the fact that it calms you, it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your heart rate, it just calms the moment for you. Now you look kind of silly if you're trying to do that in the middle of a meeting when somebody's yelling at you, but finding the time to actually use it and control it, and the biggest thing about MRT stuff is you have to practice it. It's not stuff that you can just call on in the moment. Like, you should be actively practicing this during the good times so that when the bad times happen, it's there.
Man, I love
It's muscle
it.
memory.
Oh, I love it, because this is all, I mean, all of this stuff is the path to healing. I mean, all of it. This is how you heal as a human being. This is useful for, anybody on the planet right now. Like, you can use these things to absolutely live a better life. And it's fascinating. And, I was that combat arms guy who, if you would have told me we need to do some mindfulness or breathing exercises, I'd be like, this is why the Army's weak. This is bullshit. This is woo woo. And now I'm all in on that stuff, man. I am 1,000% all in on it. I avid practitioner of all of those things. My morning routine starts with 5 things I'm grateful for the second I wake up, just to set the tone for the day. And I found when I don't do that, I have a worse day than I would if I had done it.
Oh yeah, that's that negativity bias you talked about earlier. We're all trained to see the bad. It's so easy to look at any situation and pick out all the crap about it. It's a lot harder to look at a situation and pick out the good. But you start practicing that and you start trying to be optimistic, you're going to be able to change your mindset and how you look at things. And the overall feeling you're going to have is just amazing.
I love it, man. So we already talked about this a little bit, but getting out and being suggested that you start a podcast, is that where VetSOS Podcast started? Is the second you got out, you just started running with it? And how has it evolved since you got out from 2023 when you started to now? Like, what have you seen that has started to evolve within your podcast as you do more and more, conversations with folks?
So it actually started 6 months into my transition. We started developing the podcast in 2022, and we officially launched around Memorial Day of 22. Which is one of the reasons why I had a good transition, is because I was literally talking to people during my transition about transition. Um, so over the last 2+ years, we've put out over 100 episodes. We've changed a little bit of the style and the feel and how we do things. I'm on my third co-host, and it's not that I'm running through co-hosts. Like Mark, who helped us launch and found the podcast, he stepped down at the 1 year mark. That was always the plan. He wasn't planning on staying on permanently, but he is staying on as part of the family. And in fact, he just came on and co-hosted a couple with me, because one of the guys wasn't able to make it. And then Eric, he did season 2 and 3, and then he stepped down because he's standing up in ministry, and that's taken a bunch of his time now. So he's pouring his heart into that. He just came back and hosted a couple as well. So I'm very thankful that I now have this family of people who love what we're doing. They want to still be a part of it, and they're willing to come back when they're available to help out. And so now Keith is the current co-host. And what I love about it is each one of them was also a part of my transition. So it wasn't like, I just picked some random guys or anything like that. Mark was part of the Who You Know network, who really got me started in the transition. Eric, I met through ACP. He used to work for ACP. He helped me get started with ACP, and he's the one who talked to me about, building your own personal board of directors. Building that group of people that you trust, that you can bounce things off of and things like that. And I took that a step further to having different boards, so if like Boy Scouts, I do a lot with the Boy Scouts. So I have sort of my own personal board of directors there of mentors that I bounce things off of or ask questions and things like that. And then with transition, I have a handful of people that, are on that board, and so on and so forth. And then Keith, who's the current co-host, he's famous for find a mentor, find 10. He's huge on mentorship. That is one of his big things that he talks to people about when it comes to transition. And so, each one of these guys I personally had a relationship with during my transition, and then they became part of the family, which is awesome. As we continue to move forward, this year we're launching 2 new segments. One is a veteran educational resource spotlight, and then one is a veteran entrepreneur spotlight. The educational spotlight, we're trying to reach out to schools and other educational resources to highlight what these individual campuses are doing to help veterans, because like we talked about already, entrepreneurship and school are 2 big pathways we take in transition. So we're trying to do the education piece. That's going to officially launch in October. Beginning of October, we'll start airing those episodes. And then the veteran entrepreneur one, we're talking to veteran entrepreneurs and veteran spouse entrepreneurs to talk about their journey, the pitfalls, the good, the bad, resources they used, and also give them a chance to talk about their business. And both of these are 15 minutes long, so they're down dirty, they're quick. That'll officially launch in September. So you'll start seeing that content in September. You start seeing the other one in October. And so we'll have 3 days of brand new content that comes out. So we're pretty excited about that. And the other big thing we're working on is Veterans Sharing Our Stories nonprofit, basically a spinoff of the podcast. Because the number one thing I've been asked over the last couple of years is by just everyday veterans saying, "Hey, I'd love to come on the podcast and tell my story." Well, I'd love to, because we all know veteran stories are powerful. I'd love to have them come on. I just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So we're trying to create an online platform where people can go on there and they can tell their transition story. And the kicker here is we want to capture every possible demographic and psychographic that goes along with that, so you can sort the database of videos. And we're going to open it up to veterans and veteran spouses, because the spouses go through transitions as well. So we'll have this library of stories about people's transition. And we want to talk about their journey, good, bad, or indifferent. What was the transition like? Also, what resources did you use that helped you? and we want the real emotion. And so we want to be able to sort it by every possible demographic. If you only want to listen to a certain gender or race or branch or, whatever, you could do that. But we also want to capture the psychographics so you can sort by alcoholism, depression, homelessness, suicidal ideations, drug addiction, because these are all things that we struggle with. So you can actually listen to stories from other people who are struggling or who have succeeded in moving past their initial issues. Because the number one thing I've heard over the last 3 years is I thought I was the only one going through it. So we
Yes.
want to show people you're not alone. There are people who have gone through the exact same things you're going through, and there's help. So hopefully we're hoping we can make a big impact with this.
I love this, man, because that's how I landed on my podcast. I just looked at who I was and what I thought would have helped me. And, talking to guys like you who have been there, done that, if I would have seen that when I was at my lowest point, I would have been like, oh shit, I'm definitely not alone. Like, and if this guy can do it, then there's hope for me and I can do it too. I'm not saying that it would have magically snapped me out of it, but I am saying that it would have given me some kind of hope to know that I'm not the only one struggling to figure this out. I also like that your co-hosts come from the resources that are provided to us. That's I can't say enough good things about the ACP mentorship program because I've only had my mentor for going on right at 2.5 months now, and it's not even it's like it's the coolest relationship I've ever had with somebody who is so far ahead of where I'm at and is already where I want to be, but also comes to me and really lets me know that there's something that he can learn from me as well, right? And so it's not just a one-way street. It's like he's mentoring me in a way that allows me to mentor him back in things that he may not be well versed in. And it's just been a really awesome relationship, and all of the doors that he's been able to open for me through that program and kind of helped me squash some of that imposter syndrome and really self-doubt in the entrepreneurial space, because you touched on it on this show and then your live show this morning from LinkedIn about there's those two paths. It's education or entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship's a tough road. It's a really tough road, you know what I mean? And it's kind of a lonely road, but also having somebody in my corner to observe what I'm doing, to kind of strategize with what I'm doing and to let me know that, like, hey, you're doing all the right things. Don't stop doing them. It's so powerful. And I just love that you talk about that as well. Like, we're so aligned in what we're doing. It's just fun to get to talk to people who are doing the same things,
Oh, absolutely. And I sing the praises of ACP every day as well. I mean, I'm going on 2 years now, 2+ years of talking to my mentor. We still talk just about every month. And he's on to his third mentee now. And so the fact that I have that relationship with him and the stuff that he brought during my transition, just, I love it. And the cool thing is ACP is expanding a little bit too. They're actually getting ready to
start an
launch this
entrepreneurship
entrepreneur stuff.
yeah, I
Yeah.
got
So
asked to provide feedback on that. It was
nice.
really cool to be asked to be part of that, and I think there's some opportunities for guys like you and me who have been through the program to actually be mentors in that new program. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Probably pull in a whole bunch of people if Veterati truly closes their doors.
Yeah, man,
Um,
it's been all over LinkedIn the last couple of days, and a lot of people are upset about it. And most of the people talking about it are saying that they're pushing people towards ACP. I think ACP is kind of largely an underutilized resource out there. I think not a lot of people know about it.
yeah, I don't know. I know they always are looking for new mentee or mentors because they're continuously getting mentees. So if people have any kind of business experience or life experience that they want to share with other people, I would highly encourage them to become a mentor.
Yeah, man. Dude, in closing it up here, just a couple more questions. What advice would you offer to veterans who are struggling through their transition based on your experiences and the stories that you've been able to collect and share on your podcast?
The number one thing I would tell people to do is start early. Now, obviously, some people do, some people don't. You run into people every day. I getting out in 6 months. Oh, okay. Here we go. Um, But if you can't do that, you have to be aggressive. I don't consider myself a hugely aggressive person, but the one thing I told myself was I was going to win the transition. I wanted to be aggressive with that. I wanted to make sure that we set ourselves up for success after the military. And I had that conversation with my wife. I'm like, give me these 2 years to really, make sure that we're set up for success after the military. And there were times where, she wasn't happy with me and she was wondering why I was doing certain things. And I did a lot more than I had to do. But in the long run, I'm very happy with where we ended up and how everything went. And I attribute a lot of that to just being aggressive and going after things and keeping all those doors open. I was willing to try a lot of things that got me out of my comfort zone. I started this podcast that I had no intentions of doing, and it's turned out to be a huge blessing. And now we're looking at starting a nonprofit off of it. I'm a published author now. I'm working on a book now, these are things that, I'm sure there's a few English teachers in Pennsylvania that are like, whoa, 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 whoa. But, it's things that I wouldn't have done or tried had I not been open to having discussions and learning about new things. So, it's just one of those. And the other thing I would tell people to do is learn as much as you can about yourself. So there's a bunch of different programs out there. I don't know if programs is the right word. So like uh, uh, DISC, the DISC assessment to learn your personality. That to me was a life changer. Once I fully understood how I operated and why I have the ability to piss people off so good and why certain things frustrate me, that just changes how you talk to people and communicate with people. And it gives you an idea of what, things to look out for, and then the Why Institute helps you further, what your why is. That was really eye opening. And there's a couple other things like that. You got the I'm completely drawing a blank on the big one. The big personality test that everybody takes.
The MTBI.
Yeah, sure.
The Myers Briggs.
There you go, Myers Briggs. Yeah,
that one. Yeah, the MTBI.
That's take it. Understand who you are. The other one that I tell people to do is the Values and Action Survey, which is part of the Master Resiliency Training. Now, there's a short one that you can do, and if you go to the University of Penn website, there's a bigger one you can do. I would encourage people to do the bigger one. It's like 200 questions. It takes a minute, but it really hones in on your top character strengths. And understanding your character strengths and how they impact who you are really helps you. And that was a huge thing for me in the military. Because as military guys, we all think that leadership's our number one, right? I'm a leader, I'm a soldier, I'm a non-commissioned officer, I'm a leader. Leader was like number 7 or 8 on mine, and it's really only your top 5 that are your natural character strengths that come out without any effort. So understanding what those mean and how they impact your life will also really help you understand some of the things you're supposed to do in life. And my number 1 was to care and to be cared for. I'm like, I'm 6'6", 280 pounds. I'm a soldier. I'm a non-commissioned officer. I know this is not me. And my mentor in MRT, he's like, see, you don't agree with it? I'm like, no, I don't agree with it. Come on, man. I mean, all these character strengths, this is not my number 1. And he goes, yeah, I mean, you're probably right, And he goes, what did you do at Thanksgiving this year? I said, well, we cooked a bunch of food and invited a bunch of soldiers over to the house, because we were in Korea and, nobody had any place to go. He goes, what'd you do at Christmas? I said, well, we did the same thing. Oh, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And he just smiled and walked away. I'm like, okay. And so once I understood that there were things that I was doing in my life that just seemed natural, inviting soldiers who had no place to go over to my house to just enjoy a home cooked meal just seemed like a natural thing to do. We were in Korea, a lot of people away from the house, and so, and we had done that before. We had done it at our previous place in Texas. And so starting to understand why I did certain things and why certain things came natural to me, also started realizing, okay, so now I'm running a podcast. to educate people. And I don't care about making money off the podcast. That's not my goal. My goal is to educate and give back to the community, and getting people to actually realize that some people get it, some people don't. It's the way I'm wired. And I've learned that over the years through the different assessments. So I think there's a lot of value in different assessments, and I would highly encourage people to do those types of things so that they can understand who they are and why they operate the way they do. I know it was a long way to get to the question.
No, I think that's the best advice anybody's ever given on my show. I did those things not realizing how they would help me. I was just fascinated with taking those tests to understand more about myself. But what I've learned on my journey is a lot like what you're talking about. Is I really had to learn who I was and all of my character strengths and flaws, and in order to really be able to get out of my own way and lean into those things, because there were some things that I was fighting, like, oh, that's not me. And it's like, when you go back and reassess, kind of like what your mentor did for you, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I do exhibit those, and I am really good at those, right? Like for me right now, it's leaning into being a connector, to being a people person, like to networking is a profession. And I never thought that I didn't really like people. You know what I mean? Like, I thought I didn't like people. And then when you embrace it and learn that about yourself, man, that's, I think, the best advice anybody's ever given on the show. So that's a good one to end it on, Sean. Tell everybody how they can connect with you, find your show, all the resources that you've mentioned today, all that good stuff.
So the easiest way to find anything about the podcast is VetSOSPodcast.com. You can get to YouTube through there, the different podcast channels through there, and we're on all the social media things. We're trying to grow a following there as well. So you can connect with us on just about every platform you can imagine. Going through there. And of course, we're on LinkedIn. You can get to me, linkedin.com/IN/SeanWelsh00 is my direct LinkedIn. And then also we have a VetSOS page as well. But I would love for you to connect with us, follow us, subscribe, let us know what you think of the podcast. We're always trying to make the product as good as it can be, because we want it to be a tool that is used by our community. So we appreciate any feedback we get, and especially any recommendations people have for guests. I am booked out through the rest of the year, which is a great problem to have. We got some great guests coming up. And so we're looking forward to opening up our calendar in 25 and starting to book that out. So it's a great problem to have, but it just means that we got a lot of great stuff coming.
I love it, man. Sean, thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, please like, rate, review, subscribe, download this episode. Help us get it in front of 1 million veterans before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. Thank you so much for being here, man. Such great advice. Awesome advice. And I appreciate you, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Welsh. We'll see you next week.
Pleasure, Ad.
That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.